Hi, this is Jeff. Another one of these videos about language industry topics. And the one here today is about how to get traction on funding your terminology projects. And funding can mean people, time, and money, or even uh, resources like servers or computers or whatever. So funding can be a very generic thing here. I want to be set that up for you here. So who? Okay, let's start with who. Who of you struggles with uh, creating effective communication and pitches to get some traction, to get some buy-in, and to sell your idea or your project to get some of that funding of again money or resources or physical resources, computers, or servers, or people, or their time to work on it or something, or to you to work on a topic. Okay, just for your time to work on a topic. Who have you struggles with? Okay, or let's say who have you does not struggle with that. Well, I've asked this in conferences before, and the show of hands is just obvious. So this is kind of obvious here. What? No. Let's start with what words did you and I grow up with in school that are related to terminology? Okay. Let's so the word terminology. Did you grow up with the word terminology or terminologist when you were a child? With your family or when you went to school or with your friends? Was the word terminology used? I don't think so. Okay. And I can say that having grown up in one culture for half my life and then having lived in another language and culture for the rest of my half of my life, and my kids did not grow up with this at home, and I'm a language person, so um, uh, none of the friends and stuff. I mean, just terminology is not a term, a word. Okay, terminology is not a term. Terminology is a word that people use. Okay, now what words do you grow up with in different language cultures? You know, in school, families, and all that. Okay, so things could be word, can be vocabulary, dictionary, and the one right now that's used a ton is keywords, right? Because you're googling the keywords to get some information. Okay, this is the internet version of these other things. Okay, um, so now I want to challenge you: is when was the first moment in your memory that you can recall as an adult when you started using the words terminology and terminologist? When I think back, I don't get flashbacks as a child or when I was, 2 or 3 years old doing the word terminology. It's just not that thing. Um, the probably the first time I can recall hearing the word terminology or using it is probably after my bachelor's degree in French language, probably during my master's degree in linguistics, and maybe even after that when I actually got into corporate settings where we started using the word term. I think it was actually I think it was years later when I had already finished all my doctoral studies and stuff and was working at Caterpillar. It's probably when I heard the word terminology for the first time or heard it regularly used. Okay, it wasn't just like a dictionary. So, um, so dictionary entry. So I'll challenge you because that's something to keep in mind. Again, what's the topic thing? How to get traction with your funding, your terminology project. So this is an important thing you keep in mind. Okay, so the caveat I do want to keep in mind that there can be, and I have lived in two different languages and two cultures all my life, back and forth. So, and I've spent half in one, half in the other, and but still in those two, I don't remember the word terminology being used in school and all that. Maybe other languages and other cultures, it might be okay. That's possible, but I just, this is something to think about, okay? This is not all a hard, fast rule. It's just something we're trying to see here. How can we get better traction? And of course, when you're getting funding from people, they're not always from the same culture from you as you are. So you got to keep that in mind. Okay, now that was all about kind of the what. Now what about the why? Okay, um, why is this important? Well, what do you perceive when you hear the word terminology or terminologist? I'm going to be honest here. Now, I want you to think about social media And there's a lot of these, social media have these fun graphic, 9 pictures, and it's always about how my mom perceives me on this, how my dad perceives me on this, how my best friend perceives me on this, or perceives this or that, or me, how my kids perceive me, how my boss perceives me, how my colleagues perceive me, and then how I perceive myself and how I really am. Okay, and it's this funny grid. It's really funny usually, and there's lots of examples of this. If you haven't seen them, go look at it because it'll help understand this. Um, Now let's apply that to, again, the words terminology and terminologists. So let's start with the view of, because the grid talked about from whose perspective. So let's talk about the view of the word lovers, because there's going to be a lot of word lovers, language industry people who are word lovers and language nerds who struggle, and they are also people who struggle with visibility about language and linguistics topics. And I got another video about the issue of getting out of the visibility right of being in the language industry. So go watch that to know more about that. But this again is the context of what's the view of these people that are language word lovers. Okay, language word lovers, all that. So what's their perspective of terminology? And I can say that because I come from there, and I got a lot of colleagues who come from that. Um, Terminologist is a rock star in the battle to explain the in-depth reasons of the importance of things like part of speech and definition and concept and homonyms, antonyms and synonyms and metadata, and again all those details. Okay, right? Because there's all language lover jargon, right? Okay, so now let's take the perspective of, on the grid, that picture grid of perspectives on social media. What about the non-language lovers? Okay, and keep in mind that the non-language industry person's view, they are the funders of the language projects, right? They're usually the funders. So this is the hard people. This is the hardest part here. It's easy to talk with all your friends and colleagues who are language lovers and language word lovers, but it's harder to talk to people that are not from that perspective, and they're the ones funding it. Okay, usually, especially CFOs, chief financial officers, and CIOs, and all that. They're just usually not language people. They're doing other stuff. Language databases, or they're doing language. They're doing system infrastructure and funding of accounting, all that stuff. So now, how do they perceive the words terminology and terminologists? Well, how I see it and how I've always understood it, and how it kind of been communicated to me, and I understand my family that way too. They're not in the language thing. They see terminologists as someone like a behind the scenes librarian, a book nerd, okay, an introvert who can only communicate with books, okay, and can read books, and doesn't know how to deal with human beings, okay, asocial, antisocial, okay. Okay, I'm joking here, kind of. I'm taking it to the extreme, but this is true. There's some truth to this. It's not always true. I do have some librarian friends who can be social, okay, and can get away from just reading books, but they tend to like to read the books, okay. So it just tends to be a personal thing. You don't read books together. It's not a community. It's not kind of a collaborative action. It can be, but I'm just saying that doesn't have to be, okay. So that's the why we're doing this. The why is the perspectives, because this comes into play when you want to get, again, what's the topic? This how to get the funding, folks. Different types of funding. So how can you do it? I want to get down to how we can actually change that view and the perspective of those non-language industry folks, those non-word lovers. How can we change that view, and how can we get buy-in? How can we get decisions, and how can we get some funding of people and assets and servers and time and money? Okay, how can we do it? Well, the first thing we're going to say is let's start with some basic things like some dictionaries. Okay, folks. So let's start with a couple of dictionaries right here. I got a couple. So oops, I'm dropping here. Not careful. I fall down. So I got some dictionaries here. I got some basic ones, some basic, those are the basic English ones. monolingual and bilingual. I got a cool one here of medical terminology, so all that. Um, I got I got a really cool one. I actually did a review of this in a journal one time. It's a visual dictionary. I got the review of it, and cool concepts. I mean, they're images. This is a cool kind of dictionary to have. Okay, it's called Visual Dictionary, and then of course thesauruses, which tell you all about those antonyms and synonyms and all that linguistic jargon geek kind of jargon and linguistic jargon. So all us geeks use that linguistic jargon, right? Um, so dictionaries, what are they? They're physical objects, and people grow up with them in school. Okay, um, and they're on our shelves at home. Encyclopedias too can be. Well, up to a certain point, because that has gone into a virtual setup now. Because those are heavy, they're always difficult to move when you move houses. Great if you live in the same house all your life, but then when you got to move, the first thing you got to decide what you're going to do. How much did you put in money in it? You want to move with it? Do you want to move? I've done that and moved from internationally. You got to bring those dictionaries, and they actually cost more moving it than to just buy them again. Okay, so but now we've gone to a virtual setup, virtual things. So let's admit it, we all use Google or any web browser. Okay, we all say Google as a term for searching on the internet, but we all search on any internet, internet web browser to look up words and to find an answer. Okay, look up words and find something about it, or to even just find an answer and just start typing in kind of a part of a sentence or phrase, get an idea, and you want to do that. Okay, we all do this at our work, at our job, and life in general. Okay, in a car, sometimes you go park it, well, not in the car driving, but someone's saying something, and someone else is looking it up, right? I mean, we all do this in the car too. So the first thing is objects. It's important to have these physical objects and to use those as references, or to use the physical object of looking up terms on an online dictionary. Okay, this is an actual reference. It's a physical thing. Is using a physical object to do the searching. Um, Another thing to do in all this is how to do this is simplify. You need to simplify your communication. Okay, I've learned to do this, and to get that value to the spenders again, to show the value of the things. So one of the things I've learned to do, and I really recommend you, is just stop making it sound like deep details and dry and boring. Okay, because that just won't get the funding. Um, and use some anecdotes and examples from real life, um, your real life, because you can talk about it personally. It helps to give that pitch to get to the funders, um, of how basic and essential it is to get access to words and get information about them. And I got another video again on the whole thing of visibility and what to do, and that gives some more in-depth things back because I want to focus here on this video about the terminology and terminologist kind of topic. But so the anecdotes that I use to be able to get that funding is um, I'll say, hey, at dinner, I remember the time when my wife and my kids we're all at the dinner table and we're talking about something about the distance. So I think it was when that whole thing came up with when the major eclipse, they found the black hole. Actually, one of my friends was on that project. They found the black hole thing and they were able to do doing all the visual stuff to see the black hole, because the black hole you can't see, so they can see it. And we started to look up distances, and we don't know about astronomy. So we at the dinner table, we're looking up the words. I'm looking up the words and stuff, and looking up things, astronomy and things that, and at the dinner table, folks. Or think about the time when think when my kids were at online gaming. When you want to do, I played online games with my kids. Even not just online, but actually physically, just we're all playing a game together at a console and all that game console. And think about when you want to know, oh god, those gems or that card or the tokens or something. I mean, I can't remember how many points you got to get to that. So you go look it up on the internet, right? So you go searching on it. Or think about when you're driving in the car, you're on a vacation or something, and they're talking and discussing them, and someone says, I don't know. So the kids are looking up, or the spouse is looking up, or whoever's looking up the words to get the answer. Okay, those are real things, and your funders can identify that because they do that in life too. So simplify the communication by making it that way. So I've gone through and kind of given a number of the who, the what, the why, the how, and what are the takeaways about this? Well, the first one is just stop using the words terminology and terminologist. Just stop using it. Um, unless you're talking to the other terminology geeks that are really into it, okay? Just separate your audience. With your terminology geek audience, use the jargon with them and use the word terminology and to show them that they have value. But for all the rest of the people, just stop doing that. It helps. The second thing is to really find some better and cooler sounding. Better. I mean, better. It kind of depends, okay. But here for funding, it's better. So find better and cooler sounding okay, words to put on to explain yourself and to put on your LinkedIn profile and that. And the what I put on mine now is that I work on corporate vocabulary integration. Hey, doesn't that sound cool to a funder? Yeah, it sounds like software. It sounds like systems and databases and corporate vocabulary. Boy, that's easy to understand, right? So don't use the word dictionary, and I didn't use the word terminology. Again, and then use those physical objects. Okay, use those physical objects to simplify the understanding and the comprehension of the value. The people that are not, they're not into that thing, you know, but you have to explain to them and use and explain to why it's valuable and important to get funding. Okay, for some kind of funding again, all different types of funding. Another thing is use those examples from everyday life to explain the value. Use it from your everyday life that they can identify it. They can identify it because they do it in life too. These will help you show the value of why it's important because they have to do it because it's information. You got to get access to the information. If you don't have it, then the discussion kind of doesn't finish in the car or at the dinner table or whatever. Okay. Um, or kind of get just dropped, and that's kind of frustrating for people. They want to get that answer. They got to get that information to keep the discussion going, right? So, hey, dictionary access, term access is important, has value in everyday life too. Um, then, really, I encourage all of you to think about creating a 15 to 30-second pitch of who you are, and you got to practice and practice it to do this. Uh, really a pitch of who you are and what you do that helps to explain when you're in the lunch line at work or in an elevator or whatever. It explains the value, or on giving a cold call. I did a lot of cold calls. You got to do it in 15, 30 seconds. Bam. If you don't, then I go to get the appointment to get the funding, customers, all kind of stuff. That 15 to 30-second pitch that helps you explain the value of it to normal non-word lovers, okay? Just normal people that are non-word lovers. They're not language industry geeks or nerds, okay? But they are the funders. So what I usually say, really short and simple, is my name is Jeff Allen, and I'm a scientist working in computer generated authoring and computer generated translation and even computer assisted authoring and computer assisted translation, and especially corporate vocabulary integration with all these different tools for the users to be able to do their work. Hey, that sounds pretty cool, huh? I don't use the word terminology. I don't use a terminologist for that kind of customer facing thing or funding facing things, people, because they just can't identify with it. You need to get your funders to identify with you and your need and their value. Hope that helps.